Okay, we're going to start in Exodus and read through the Bible tonight.
Why not start in Genesis?
We're going to focus on just one mother, Moses' mother, and how much she was able to accomplish in just a very short time. So we'll start with Exodus 2. Now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she... any of you mothers give birth to a child who was not a fine child? She hid him for 3 months. Let me just very quickly give a little bit of a background, because this is during the time that the Jewish people were enslaved to the Egyptians, and they were treated quite cruelly. And so this was a crisis time. It was a hard time. So when she could hide him no longer, now the reason that she was hiding him is because Pharaoh recognized that the Jewish people were no longer just guests, but now they were filling the house. It wasn't going to be very long that the Jewish people were going to be more than the Egyptian people, and that's a scary thing, because if you have a revolt, and you can't control them, the Egyptians are going to wind up being slaves, right? So this is what the Pharaoh did. He said, any male child that's born to a Jewish woman needs to be thrown into the Nile River. And so basically, Moses' mother, she decided to hide her baby after he was born. But it says, when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. And then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. I want to inject this so that we get the picture. That's kind of a scary thing to do. Take your baby, put him in a basket, and put him in the river. What is going to happen to him? What's going to happen to the basket? How many of you understand the Nile River is not the safest place to put a baby? I mean, there's alligators in the Nile River. And where do they hide? They usually hide among the reeds, kind of on the side of the river, just waiting for something that smells good. This is it's a huge thing of trust. Trust in God for Moses' mother to do. Now they had this already arranged. Now you know, any Jewish mom is going to have this arranged. His sister, Moses' sister, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank, and she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. Now, does this sound like a setup or what? She was trusting that God was going to take care of this baby. Now, she didn't know what was going to happen, right? That's part of what we're going to talk about, is when you trust God and you don't know what's going to happen. She opened it, that's the daughter, Pharaoh's daughter. She opened it and saw the baby And he was crying, and she felt sorry for him. Oh, poor baby. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. And then his sister, Moses' sister, asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Ah! Oh, yes, go, she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother, Moses' mother, right? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take the baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby, nursed him, and when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, Pharaoh's daughter's son, Pharaoh's grandson. Okay? She named him Moses. Now, who named him Moses? Pharaoh's daughter. This is a, how do I say, this is an Egyptian name, right? He grew up in Pharaoh's household with an Egyptian name, saying, I drew him out of the water. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Now we're going to look at a different passage in a minute, but I want you to see something. My goodness, I don't know how long his mother nursed him. I don't know how long she had him, but doubtful it was for 5 years. You know, most likely it was for 2 years or 3 years. I'm sure she drug it out as long as she could so that she would have that influence on her son. Now, this is powerful. He grows up, you understand this, in a Egyptian household, very Egyptian, the king of Egypt, and he grows up with an Egyptian name. Everything he knows is Egyptian, but this is interesting. One day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were. How did he know this? How did he know he was not Egyptian? You know, during those 4 years, his mom had a powerful influence on him. And that's what we want to talk about, is this powerful impact that she had on him. Now we understand the time. The time was a time of crisis. The time was how do I say it? They lived in emergency mode. The Jewish people were not the people who were in charge. That's one of the most difficult things about slaves, is that they don't get to make their own plans. They don't have control over their own days or future. They don't have any real control over anything in their lives. They are slaves. Okay? Now, this is a fascinating thing. Most of you understand the story. When people, how do I say it, don't make their own plans, don't make their own schedules. They don't decide themselves what it is that they're going to do. Something dies inside their brain. You remember the story when we had slaves in the United States, and those slaves were set free by the Emancipation Proclamation. They were free. But that didn't necessarily mean anything to the slaves, because they had never lived as free people. They didn't know how to make their own plans. They didn't know how to get their own jobs. They didn't know anything about being free. And so that mentality of being a slave was the only thing they knew. They continued to live as slaves on the same plantations that they were before. And, there were some who understood what was happening and went out and tried to arrange their own lives, but that was totally distant from their thinking. Now, I want for you to see that there was something different in Jochebed. Now, it's interesting because it doesn't mention her name. There's only 2 places in the Bible where it mentions Jochebed by name, Moses' mother. There might be a purpose for that. Moms don't very often get much celebrity. They just do what they're supposed to do. But there was something going on inside of her because she developed this plan for her baby. This plan for her baby was, we'll stick him out here in a specially prepared basket, and we will have his sisters stand there and wait. And if anybody comes along who would like for a Hebrew woman to nurse this Hebrew baby, then that will be the suggestion that's made, right, from the sister. So this is a little bit different. We see something different in her to start with. She was in, how do I say it, emergency mode. She was not, she was trying to plan. She was trying to think ahead. She was trying to figure out something better. So we see this. And what I want to suggest is that, how do I say this? She did what she could do. How many of you understand that principle? You know, everything is shut down. Everything you're told no, you can't. So what do? You figure out what you can do, and you do that. And then, what do? You trust God. Now that's what she did. Now we're going to jump over to Hebrews and pick up a little bit more. Hebrews 11. Now we're going to start with verse 23. And this is how we find out a little bit more about the story that we didn't find out in Exodus. It says, by faith Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born. Now, I want to just grab the word because I want for us to see this. It says, by faith they did this, trusting God. They made this plan trusting God because they saw that he was no ordinary child. They were not afraid of the king's edict. Now the king says, you have to dump your baby boys in the Nile River, and if you don't, we'll dump you in the Nile River. So it's just, but what this says is by faith. So this is it throws in a little bit of a help for us to understand. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Where did he get this? She has raised him as his mother. It seems like from what this is saying, this took place when Moses was like 40 years old, or maybe 39 or something. I don't know. But he has lived as a part of Pharaoh's household all this time with an Egyptian name. He speaks the Egyptian language, and somehow this comes up. It says he refused to be identified with Pharaoh's daughter. It wasn't because he had a rebellious streak, because we see how quick he was to obey God. So it wasn't just, whoever's giving the orders will rebel against them. There's something else going on. He refused. How many of you understand? This is a little bit odd. When you have wealth and privilege and honor and all of these things are given to you, our natural nature, our human nature loves that. So this is real unusual. Somehow during that, whatever it was, 3 years, 4 years, maybe at the outside 5 years, his mother was able to give him such a value structure that it stayed with him all of this time. That's quite a mom, right? You agree with me? That's quite a mother. And listen to this. This even gets better. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. To choose suffering. Now it makes it clear. He chose suffering because that's what God's people did. Somehow he had connected, how do I say it, the fortunes of life to God. How did she do that in such a short time? I don't know. I don't know if they had ongoing sessions, where she could teach this. But even so, to teach it to a person who, how do I say it, was blessed by position to receive everything easy, everything nice, everything pleasant, and he chose different because of God. That's what it says. Somehow he identified the value that was in God. Now, I just say, that's difficult to teach kids the value that is in God. I mean, you look around right now, and kids of Christian parents are having a problem teaching them the values that are connected with God. Where do they learn most of their values? In school, from their friends, from TV? I'm sure Moses didn't have a TV, but he had all the other opportunities to learn that ease, comfort, all the sweets and all the blessings of life are not the ultimate. This is amazing to me. And somehow his mother got this across to him in a very short time, in a very limited way. Now, this is my contention, is she did it more by her example than by, teaching him Bible lessons, showing him VeggieTales. He refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. How did he get all this? He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as greater value than the treasures of Egypt. This is amazing. Because he was looking ahead to his reward. Whew. We wish we could teach our kids this today. By faith, he left Egypt not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. In other words, she gave him a concept of God. unfortunately, there's a lot of Christians today who don't have a real concept of God. And we'll see this, we'll talk about it in a minute here. By faith, he, Moses, kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. This is just a fascinating story. And most of us understand this is a part of, I want to say, a misconception that we have as parents, that we want to make life as easy as we can for our kids. We want to make life we want for our kids to experience as little pain as possible. We want for them to have the best opportunities in life. Now, the reason I bring that up is because this seems to be different. Most of us, now I remember a couple weeks ago I was talking about Samson. Some of you who are here remember that about Samson. Samson was a spoiled kid. When he didn't get to marry the girl that he wanted to marry, he pretty much told his dad, God is out of touch. I should be able, I have this freedom, right? Given to me by the Constitution of the United States. I have this freedom. I can marry anybody that I want. I can marry my dog if well, I'm getting carried away here. But the idea here is that he feels like God doesn't understand. And if you follow the story as it goes through, Samson was so spoiled, he couldn't take no. Right? You understand that? How many kids today don't understand no? Now somehow Jochebed, Moses' mother, really got this through to him so strong that he could say no to the pleasures of sin. That's what it says. And this is basically what I'm saying. Jochebed, by her example, what do we see in her example? She did what she could. A lot of things she couldn't do. She was threatened with her own life. But she did what she could. And then she trusted God. Put it in God's hands. Let God make the decision what happens to this baby. Oh my goodness, that's hard for parents to do today. But this is what she did, and it's so awesome. I want to deal with a principle. Some of you who are C.S. Lewis fans have heard this principle because it's a principle that he makes in his Chronicles of Narnia that I think is one of the most awesome theological helps for us. Do you remember what they said about Aslan? The beavers were talking to the kids, the Pevensey kids that came to Narnia. They were talking to them about Aslan, and the little girl says, "Aslan is a lion? Lions are scary. Is Aslan scary?" And this is the answer, and this shows up all through the whole Narnia series. Aslan is a kind lion, but he's not tame. Do you get that? Does that make sense? What do we mean by tame? We mean by tame, we control him. Right? a tame dog, a tame cat, a tame whatever, alligator, is one that we control. And so we tell people, oh, you don't have to worry, he's tame. But what do they say about Aslan? And most of you know that Aslan is representative of God, of Jesus. And this is C.S. Lewis' take on this. I just think that he really caught something that he wants for us to understand. God doesn't work for us. He isn't tame. But he is loving. He's kind. He's helpful. He's definitely for us. But we don't control him. Does that make sense? Do you get the impact of this? This is a powerful concept. And I think it fits so well because when we're talking about people who relate to God, one of the difficulties that happens is our own flesh constantly wants to work it out so that God does what we want him to do. Do you hear this? Do you see this? It's sometimes underlying and it's sometimes not real out front. But there was an instance where Jesus, this is in Matthew 11, there was an instance where there was some crowds in the whatever we call it, the marketplace, and Jesus was there. And Jesus picked up pretty quickly. They were not too happy with Jesus. And so he attempts to explain to these people what's going on. He says, you say we piped and he didn't dance. In other words, we played dance music. We tried to get Jesus to dance for us. We tried to get him to conform to what we wanted him to do, and he wouldn't do it. So now what happens? It made them upset with Jesus. It made them not want to be followers of Jesus because he wasn't tame. He wouldn't do what they wanted him to do. Now, I'm going to hopefully explain this a little more in a minute, but I just want for you to get this point. And then it says, we played, what was it? Dirge music, funeral music, and you were supposed to cry when we did that, and you didn't cry. And then he makes this point. He says, you didn't like John the Baptist when he came, because he came presenting the righteousness of God, and you need to repent. You didn't like that. I came, Jesus saying, I came, and I was mingling with the crowd. I was friends with everybody, and you didn't like that either. You people are impossible to please. Now, he didn't use those words, but this is the idea, is that if we get close to Jesus, if we become buddy-buddy friends with Jesus, we are expecting a certain kind of response from him to our call, our need, our what we're doing. And Jesus was saying, you guys have these expectations, and I don't do requests. Now, why am I saying all of that? I am sure that Moses' mother had in mind that she wanted for her son to succeed. Right? But she never put it into the terms of, well, if you behave in a certain way, or if you pray in a certain way, or if you have certain expectations, or if you, so to speak, play your cards right, God will make you a success. How many of you hear something here? Why do we do that? We want to use God for our purposes. How many of you understand Moses understood that if he played his cards right, he wasn't going to get wealthy? He was, in that same sense as his mother, his life was in the hands of God. Now, what was God going to do? Now, this is where we always, get nervous. What was God going to do? If we put our lives in his hands, what is God going to do? He might send us to Peru. What are we going to do if we put our lives in God's hands? I mean, do you understand that's a scary thing? How many of you understand it's a scary thing? Now, I have a problem. I don't know how women get married, because the Bible says right away, oh, you need to do whatever your husband's doing. Who knows what my husband is going to come up with next? So even that is hard for me. And then we get to God, and this is the problem. God is unpredictable. God comes up with stuff. How many of you have heard of some of the stuff that God comes up with? And so that's scary. I think I would rather keep my life under my own control than to put my life under the control of God. But somehow Moses, somehow Jochebed got this message across to Moses, where Moses was, I don't know how to say this, but open to what God wanted. And he felt it so deeply. He was so committed to that. He was committed to doing what was right. Now, there's a lot of people, and to me it's kind of fun, because if I can get into a conversation about investing money, that's a a fun topic for me, because I feel like that's something God wants us to do, is learn about investing. But most of us have this. I remember one of my roommates, he was having some money problems, and he saw me on the computer every morning going on the stock markets, and he says, I want you to teach me how to invest in the stock market. And, well, I knew his situation, and I said, I don't think you have any money to invest. Well, I'll take a little bit and I'll invest it. I said, but you've got to be ready to lose anything that you invest. That's part of what investing is all about. Well, he says, I don't want you to tell me about the ones that are going to lose money. I only want you to tell me about the things that are going to make money. I said, you can't do that. That's impossible. You can't do that. You invest, and you kind of bank on what you know or what you have heard or something, and you're hoping that it will make money. But if you're not willing to lose money, and so most of the time when people ask me, well, how do you do in investing? I usually tell them about my last big loss. I lost $400 last week. Why do I tell them that? Because I don't want them to get ideas that, Pastor Larry knows how to make money. He's going to tell me what stocks to invest in, and I'm going to make a lot of money. Why do I say all that? I want to say that's the kind of thing we do with God. We say, now God, I don't mind investing my life, my time, my money. I don't mind investing those things if I'm sure that you're going to make me a success. Do you understand what I'm saying? One of the instances that to me is so interesting, I mean, to really make this point, is remember the Jewish boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they would not bow to the image, the idol, and King Nebuchadnezzar just got so, it says that his face turned purple. That's how angry he got. Ooh. Now this guy is one that's used to getting his way, right? He orders something and it happens the way he ordered it. He's not used to people saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And here he set up this elaborate thing where, you know, when the music played, everybody would bow down to the idol, and he had it all worked out. Had it worked out to where they knew what the penalty was if they didn't do it. And he finds out that there's these guys in his cabinet that won't bow down. Ooh, he was so mad. So he says, okay guys, I'm going to give you a second chance. And this was their answer. It's classic. Their answer is, we're not going to bow down. But you're going to get thrown into the incinerator. They go, it doesn't make any difference. And this is what they say. If God wants to, he will deliver us from the furnace. If God chooses not to, it doesn't matter. We're still free from you. Right? That's what he said. And what they said. Now, this is classic because they did not say we're not going to bow down because they knew that God was going to deliver them. They had that confidence. God is going to deliver us. Do you understand? What did they know for sure? They only knew for sure that just a short time they were going to be free from Nebuchadnezzar. Either by death, they were going to be burned up in the furnace, or they were going to be not burned up in the furnace. They had no guarantee from God that things were going to turn out wonderful. Do you understand what I'm saying? Can we have that kind of trust in God to say, hey, up to you, God. I'm going to go on this, short-term mission trip to China with all the rest? But do you understand the dangers of going to China? Yeah, I've heard. But you sure you want to do this? You know, this is an interesting place. Sure, I trust God. If I die, I die. Oh, I wish I had time. I don't have time, but I want to throw another character out to you. David saw so many people. He was a soldier. He saw so many people die. Do you think he knew the reality of dying in battle? Oh, absolutely. He'd seen so many people die, get stabbed, get arms cut off, get legs cut off. He understood totally. But every time he was called on to go to battle, he straps on his stuff, he gets ready to go. Why? Because his life was in God's hands, not in his. And it didn't matter. when he, I think about that so often, when he was running toward Goliath, he wasn't going, oh, I hope I make it. I hope I live. I hope God rescues me. I hope that I get to go home tonight. I don't think he was doing that. His life was in God's hands. And he was secure in that. Where did Moses get that? I think he got it from his mom. I think he saw the way that she responded. And why do I tell all these stories? I just want to say, this is what God is calling us to do. We do what's right. Not because of what we're going to get out of it. We do what's right because we're doing it for God, right? I mean, that's pretty simple. How many of you know God is a good God? How many of you know he's not a tame God? So our faith, our trust, our hope is in his goodness. Okay, I hope you got it. Boy, what a Mother's Day message, huh? But I think this is awesome. Jochebed had it. She understood. Somehow she was able to transmit to her son, I don't know if it was 3 years or 5 years, or maybe she had an ongoing relationship with him. I don't know. But I know this, that he watched his mom and he knew. What would she do? She'd do whatever she could do, and then she would trust God. And that's what he learned. And he got all the values that she taught him. Oh my goodness. So I just want to say, there's a lot of times we wish things were different than the way they are. We wish our government were different than it is right now. Sometimes it gets really scary. Somebody told me that today, I haven't been able to watch the news today, but somebody told me today that all of the military bases all over the world are on high alert because of threats from ISIS. I don't know whether that's true or not. That's what I heard. You know what? Our world is scary. But I want to say, so what are we going to do different? If we're doing the right thing, our life is in his hands, right? Is it scary? Well, this is the whole idea. God is loving. He's kind. He's good. But he doesn't always do what we want him to do, right? Okay, let's pray.